question for you to be thinking about. So I've got some questions that I'm going to be asking Srini. And so earlier, I was talking about, doing the research that you and I have talked about, but specifically that at a very, very young age, we become conditioned. And you're a psychiatrist, so you know a lot about the brain and people's behaviors. And we become conditioned: conscious mind, unconscious mind, money story. We have beliefs and habits and perception of what we believe is possible. And so when we think of conditioning, okay, from a scientific perspective, how powerful is somebody's conditioning from childhood or their teen or early adult years?
Conditioning is extremely powerful. And I think the one thing that I'd want to sort of just say up front is that we all have conscious thoughts, right? We have thoughts like, I want to make more money. I think maybe I can do this. We have goals that we formulate in our minds. But the conscious brain is really only a very small part of actually making any kind of decision. It's the unconscious brain that can actually make more than 90% of your decisions. So one of the things I'd want to say is that we really need to recognize, and one of the reasons I love your program is that your program doesn't just address the conscious brain, right. It addresses the unconscious brain as well. And the unconscious brain is extremely powerful in forming habits early on in life. And so I think for most people, our brains are wired so that we just go on in the same pattern over and over again, even when we think we're doing something different. So here's an experiment that I'd like to tell you about.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of psychologists and psychiatrists standing around a long time ago, including Freud, looking at how babies behaved. And what they found was that there was this peculiar behavior. You can imagine a bunch of intellectuals standing around saying, oh my God, this is sort of strange. And so they looked at babies and they saw babies in their cots and they had toys with them. And what the babies did was they threw the toys out, which most people would say, oh, it's just a baby. But if you think about it, it is a strange behavior. You have something and you are deliberately throwing it away. And so when they looked at that, they thought, okay, this is a bit strange. And then the baby started crying. And so they thought, well, okay, this is even stranger. First of all, the baby made a decision to throw the toy out, and then the baby starts crying. And so the mother brings the toy back, and then the baby gets really happy, and it's like, yeah, I have my toy back. And then the moment the mother turns around again, the baby throws the toy out again. And so they started saying, what is this strange behavior? Why is it that human beings could be wired to throw away the very things that they want, cry about it, and then do that over and over again?
Great. It's insanity, right?
It really is insanity. But if you think about that, in our adult lives, we often get caught in that very same predicament. And so one of the leading theories about this is that the reason we keep on failing and the reason we keep on not taking action is that we would rather master disappointment than seek fulfillment.
Oh, hold on a second. Repeat that. We would rather master disappointment than seek fulfillment.
That's right.
Wow, that is so powerful.
Well, that is powerful, and it's a very destructive habit. A lot of people actually don't recognize that when they make choices not to change, they want to keep themselves stuck so they can get really good at the fact that their lives suck, which is really not the way we want to be in the world. What we want to do in the world is really change the brain's attentional flashlight, take it off from trying to just, survive and take it to thriving.
I love that. So here's a question, to ask yourself right now as you're watching. Are you, whether it's consciously, you probably not, but are you unconsciously mastering disappointment? Because then you have the self-esteem that I'm at least good at that, right? I would imagine that's the underlying reason. Well, now I have some value.
Right.
I love that.
And there's actually a concept called self-handicapping, which is when people set themselves up for failure by not taking the actions that they need to take. And then they say, well, I just couldn't do it. And so what I loved about what you said earlier on was that it's important not just to be interested, but to be committed. Because I think commitment is the first step that you've got to take to reverse these brain-based habits.
I love that. And so I wanted to ask you, what have you found, and you work with major businesses around the world, with individuals, what have you found in working with individuals are a few of the key factors that is holding them back from not just the financial freedom, but the choice freedom, emotional freedom, and the time freedom that they ultimately want?
Well, I think if I think about, there are a number of different factors, but I think the number one factor is fear.
Fear.
And I think it's fear not just of failure, it's fear of success. And let me tell you a little bit about this.
Before you say that, when I hear fear of failure of success, I think it's actually not the failure or success that they're fearful of, it's the embarrassment or being ashamed, or as you and I have discussed about being disappointed that I've tried something again and I didn't do it or it didn't work. Would that be, it's not the fear or the failure or success, it's the other feelings that they're moving away from?
Right, but more importantly, I think rather than the conscious fear, because I can imagine a lot of people sitting out there saying, I'm not afraid. I'm sitting here, I'm just listening to these guys, and they're talking about the science. There's no fear. I'm not trembling. I'm not sweating. But the reality is that a large part of fear is unconscious. So if I put anyone in a brain imaging scanner and I showed them a face that was threatening, even if I showed it to them for 10 to 30 milliseconds, they would have no idea that they had seen the face.
Milliseconds.
Yeah. They would have no idea that they had seen the face. But the brain's anxiety center, the amygdala, would actually start blinking and would actually start activating. So what we know is that the fear center is connected to the thinking brain. And if you get these earthquakes in the anxiety center, you get these aftershocks in the thinking brain. And so the frontal cortex, which usually allows you to get to your goals. It usually allows you to do things like click on the button, make a commitment, tell yourself that you actually want to make a change in your life. Because of this unconscious fear that you can't even feel, this will disrupt that particular decision-making part of your brain. And so I think it's really powerful that a lot of people do not recognize that unconscious fear is standing in the way of their success.
I totally love that. And the other thing I know is that when that fear center lights up, the amygdala, then the motivational circuits start to dwindle as well. So then we lose the motivation for actually taking action. So the fear circuit prevents us from taking action, even though we may not even be aware of it.
Right, and it can also diminish your action. Because I'm sure a lot of people are saying, oh, come on, I go to work every day. I make a decent living. My question is, are you living into your greatest possibility?